And I'm sat here thinking instead of leaving the tent because I'm me. Whatever else I am, I'm me. So I guess I'm not getting to Panera before 4 o'clock. And that's just going to have to be fine. I'm live now. Okay, so let's talk. Let's talk basic comprehension. Let's talk the rules. Let's talk the rules of public speaking and public engagement, public writing. Okay? You think you're pretty savvy. I know you think you're pretty savvy. But let's just talk the basics. And for those of you who know the basics, maybe I'll articulate them in a way that you think is amusing enough to listen and see if I go any deeper than that. Okay. There is a maxim in public writing. You write anything, a commercial, a movie, television show, or newspaper article, anything, a YouTube channel, anything that's written by anyone in the know with any level of education about how to do the basics of the craft of writing, anything that's written is composed at a third grade level. It's the maxim. Compose it at a third grade level. Okay. Now, there's a reason for this. And it goes back a little bit before now. I don't know when this started as an idiom. I began hearing it in the 90s. So maybe the 80s. Because idiom like this, they don't stick around long. They don't stick around long because if you repeat timeless truisms, timeless truths, timeless maxims, if you repeat timeless maxims, the masses who are dissatisfied by not being able to meet the standard, or at least who there is a certain percentage of the human population who are going to disbelieve anything that is consensus. They're automatically, these people are called active resistors. Anything that is conceded upon, anything that is in wide agreement among their peer group or their social group, anything that's consensus, they're going to naturally because of temperament and willful inclination, but because of temperament, because of who they are as a person, as a character, there's a certain percentage of the human population. It's not an even 20%. People don't actually. There are 5 categories of people as far as resistance. You've got active resistance, passive resistance, neutral, active acceptance, and passive acceptance. I didn't do that scale from bottom to top, but you know what I'm saying. And it doesn't neatly break up into even 20% sections of the population. I don't know the math. I don't think I care to know the math because you can't interview 7 billion people. And this is observational behavior. This isn't self-reportage. And not everybody is an active resistor to everything. But there are a certain number of people, there is a certain percentage of people who are active resistors to everything. The only personality trait they learned was active resistance. Active rejection of new information. And the thing with these people is you can't talk to them. You can't communicate with these people because they don't know where they got their information from, because they'll insist that it was all ingrown, that they got it from within. And this is why I spend so much time. If you'd like to know why I spend so much time repeating the same things, it's because I don't know who's never heard anyone say this, but your thoughts did not come from within. You got your ideas from somewhere. This is why historians and academics know where they got theirs, and they can cite them, and they reference them passively in conversation. Because if we share a common person that we know, a common icon for an idea, and what that idea represents in the real world, then we don't have to talk about the quibbly fiddly biddly stuff around it. That doesn't matter. Like when you're communicating between friends and your friend knows that you're not a neo-Nazi, but you make a scene Kyle, he's about this tall, joke. Your friend can laugh because they know that you're just being funny. You're just saying something that's completely and wildly inappropriate, but funny because it's harmless. Because you They can trust that you don't include any of the fiddly biddly bits that don't belong in the communication. Because communication isn't a string between two cups that you speak into and the vibrations travel perfectly and gather nothing else. Communication is much more like a Wi-Fi call, like this, what I'm doing right now. Actually, I'm doing this right now in the exact way I'm doing this right now, because this thing we're doing, if you meditate on it broadly enough, for long enough, you'll realize that this is a perfect metaphor for what communication is. Communication is on a string with a vibration on it, and if you can clip off the vibrations, if you can just clip out the sound file, then you can listen to the sound file over and over and over again, and you can begin to plumb it for meaning. It's not what communication is like. Because first of all, I can't clip off any sound file. And you're not gonna listen to it over and over again. You're gonna get bored. That's what cycling thoughts are like. You're not actually remembering the thing accurately. Even when you tell the story back, you're gonna embellish, you're gonna change, you're gonna add words that you should have, or you're just gonna tell the story wrong, because memory is not perfect. Communication is the same thing. It's much more like a broadband signal that's carrying a lot of extraneous information along with it. A lot of extraneous information along with it. And so the more you start to add on to any compound sentence, the more you begin to add on to any compound sentence, let alone multiple sentences strung together in a loose and flowing format, like a non-paragraph format, so that they're only loosely related to one another as you're spitting thoughts out because you're bored, or whatever your reason may or may not be. Every one of those lines of text comes with it a huge bandwidth of associated information. In large part because the only thing that you are actually communicating is the set and setting of your fucking worldview. You're not communicating any information outside the set and setting of your worldview. And so now we get back to why we communicate at a third grade level. Because at a third grade level at the level of third grade are icons that we have all been alive long enough to have engaged with, long enough to have at least recognition and comprehension of. But in writing, there's a reason that they tell writers, especially young early writers, that if you want to find any amount of success whatsoever, you have to write and you have to speak at a third grade level. Something I don't do. Not doing right now. I'm speaking at a very disorganized and disjointed professional level, way beyond a college seminar. Much more like what it would be like to have an actual conversation with a professional and expert at any field, is how I'm speaking. I'm emulating them, because emulation is rivalry, and rivalry means alternative. I'm the alternative academic. But you speak at a third grade level because third grade, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, are designed for, I guess I should have done four. Anyway, they're designed for a very singular purpose. You are intended to learn three things. Three basic things by the time you're in fourth grade. And there's an and coming. There's a part two to this. You're meant to learn three basic things. Basic reading and writing, basic literacy, basic arithmetic, and basic social skills. Basic social skills. Most of you were allowed out of third grade with none of those. None of them. You lack basic literacy. You lack mastery of basic literacy. I see how people grip pencils. I see how people type. I see your habits when you text. You lack basic literacy. Don't give me internet literacy is a different thing. We texted like that in the late 90s and the early 2000s because they charged us per character. We typed like that in MMORPGs because we were also maneuvering our characters in high intensity group situations where any failure, any lack of communication, even brief, would get everyone killed and start the whole thing over and result the everyone dying. Something in video games that nobody fully appreciates until it happens to you is you just wasted a massive amount of time that compounds. If you eat that fucking food that took you 12 hours to gather and gather the supplies for and make, or 12 hours to fucking gather the gold together to fucking buy, and then you eat it and then you wipe, you know what just happened? You wasted minimum 12 hours of your life. Gone. Flushed down the toilet. Why? Because that dickhead decided to type YOU instead of you. That's different. That's a high pressure group situation where time is on the fucking line. Doing the same thing because you're texting while you're behind the wheel of your car shows a flaw, a fundamental flaw in the processing of your thinking. Okay, so why third grade? And why does that matter? Basic literacy doesn't just mean reading the ability to read signage and to sign your name. It means basic literary critical thinking. This is why you had to do all those book reports. Basic literary critical thinking. This is why the only signage you're aware of, or the only literature that you're aware of, is warnings and signage telling you how not to die. Because without basic literary critical thinking, you don't get basic critical thinking skills. Without basic logic, it doesn't occur to you not to bring electricity into the bathtub with you. Without basic sequencing, you can't report a crime that has happened to you to the police because you can't basically sequence it. Without basic literary critical skills, I don't like reading. It's not for pleasure, asshole. It's for the third thing. Basic social skills. If you can't read a book, you can't read a face. They're the same skill. If you don't like to read a book, you don't like to read texts. If you don't have the patience to read and examine a book for meaning, you don't have the patience to read and examine a thread post or a YouTube comment. You don't have the time to organize your own thoughts in a way that are communicating anything besides basic worldview. Lacking these skills, you are a permanent 4-year-old intellectually. Now, I could go into examples and proofs of how I know this to be true. Besides the psychological, besides the observational, besides that I had younger siblings and cousins and I was around small children and you fucking weren't. So you don't actually know what 4-year-olds are like. You just know that your parents called you socially immature with a significantly younger age than your body, and it made you because you didn't know what that means, and your parents kept you in line in the home by withholding necessary information from you. Necessary information like how you're supposed to be acting at this age. Because if they tell you how you're supposed to be behaving at this age, you're gonna do the opposite because of some degree of resistance in the home. Because young people who are forever intellectually 4 years old don't know how to be critical of their own thoughts. They don't know how to be critical of their own feelings. They don't know how to be critical of their own behavior. They don't know how to examine themselves and improve from within. They don't know how. So when they tell you that their thoughts came from within, they are necessarily wrong because they don't know how to be critical of the thoughts that are coming from within. So when they're taking a thought that they think is from within and they're projecting it to without, what they're doing is taking something they heard somewhere else, internalizing it and making it their own in their own words and thinking that that's the ownership process. It's the creative work of a 4-year-old. I sat last night and I watched a couple of parents sit and ignore their children at a Taco Bell after 10 p.m. And all the children knew how to do was just yell baby noises and run around like babies, like little babies, because they hadn't been socially conditioned. They hadn't been socially engaged on any level. On any level. Besides the tiny baby. And so they just acted like tiny, tiny babies. They were too old to be acting that way. But the parents just ignored everything else. Literally ignored everything but when they would lay on the floor and scream, "Dad." Basic social skills. So everything is written at a 3rd grade level. Everything is written at a 3rd grade level. Because that's the last time that everybody engaged. Because approaching 85% of human beings were allowed past 3rd grade without any of those skills mastered adequately. And then the next 9 to however many years of education and training they take are just building on top of an absolute dog shit foundation. Utter dog shit foundation. I don't know who the member is that would withdraw a like from me. But there needs to be a great big fucking trench, a moat with fucking spikes and barbed wire and zombie dogs between me and the audience, especially the YouTube paying audience. The members, all of you need to be many, 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 many miles away from me. You cannot handle me. And you think that my basic social skills of saying hello and recognizing your PFP and noticing when it changes, you think that's like deep friendship. You think that's something meaningful, when it's not. It's the least meaningful. It would be more meaningful if I didn't. All it means is that I have basic social skills. Basic social skills. You walk into my gas station and I know your name because you've said it to me, or I know your face because I see it every fucking day, and it changes, or I don't say hello to you first. I'm the one who lacks basic social skills, not you. You don't need to know my name because you're not in my gas station to be my friend. But you come to YouTube looking for friends on that side of the camera? The parasocial relationship shit doesn't make sense to try to have with me, a homeless person that every dollar you give to, or every moment that you spend watching an ad for, you're going to think I owe you something, when what I'm doing is providing the value for both of those things. Jesus Christ. I invite you into my home. and you slander me to my face. Because you lack the basic social skills of an 8-year-old that's been trained in a public school setting. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for both of us. And it keeps happening. So if it keeps happening to me in different environments, with different people of different temperaments, there are two ways that we can critically examine this. We could say, okay, well, the common denominator is clearly me. The lowest common denominator, the smallest common denominator is clearly me. So it's either my behavior or it's a behavior that a vanishingly small class of people shares with me because we're the only ones who graduated from 3rd grade. That is a lonely and isolating conclusion to come to, binary to come to. Either way, I'm in a vanishingly small population of people who can even begin to understand what's going on in here so I can not be depressed, so you out there can enjoy the fruits of what goes on in here. That is a vanishingly small community. Vanishingly small meaning approaching 0% of the human population. So small, you almost can't see it at all. How is one supposed to find that speaking at a 3rd grade level? I don't know, but my back is broken with the weight of you people. I can feel my shoulders sloping, my back, the muscles in my back conforming to the way I have to sit to make myself small in public for you people. To sit in this tent uncomfortably. Can't sit all the way up, I'm too tall. "7 Days to Die," as I publish it, as I post it. I don't understand what sort of member would try to discourage me. Like, what's wrong with you? Why are you a member of my channel? Why are you subbed to my channel? Why are you here? Go away. Seriously, just go away. "7 Days to Die" is a metaphor for my life. It's a metaphor for my problem solving. It's a metaphor for ego death. And I don't know how I'm gonna do it. I have more than 80% of it that doesn't have audio, so I'm gonna have to do vocal performances. I don't know how I'm gonna do it. But it's a metaphor. It's a one-to-one. That is how I solve problems in the real world. I'll fail in a way that punishes me and ruins what I'm doing in an effort to confront it head on. Knowing that I will fail and that I could salvage this if I didn't confront it head on. But the longer you stave off failure, and I understand that certain YouTubers understand this better than I do from an entertainment standpoint, but I'm not trying to entertain, I'm trying to teach, trying to coach, trying to inform. The longer you stave off failure, the more spectacular it is. So if what I'm trying to do is be spectacular, I'm doing it wrong. But you misunderstand me all the time, thinking that I'm trying to be spectacular. I'm not trying to be spectacular. I am exceptional. It's not exactly the new day's mist that I'm running, or emerging, or coming, or hunting. I'm not exactly harvesting the land or taking of the fallen lamb, but oh, that feels so good and also so bad. Give me a second. Of wolf and man, informed much of who I am. And I am roaming the land while you sleep. And then I do shape shift on some level at night. I become Phil or Dick or Darigalzu, etc. Back to the meaning of life. What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of meaning? These are simple things if you're willing to do the basic homework. I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand the resentment with homework. I don't take home work that I'm not paid to do from home. But enriching the self and answering burning questions of the soul is the work of a lifetime, and no one's going to pay you for it. Do you know how I know that? I have them right here with me. No one gives a shit. Absolutely nobody gives a shit. Absolutely zero people in my life have ever come to me humbly seeking my answers. No one has ever come to me humbly seeking my religion. Never once. Never once. Humbly. Coming to receive. You ask to reject because you think that the religious process, the process of critically examining religion for submission, is the process of choosing which sky daddy you're gonna serve as you're gonna serve as a slave in eternity. And it's like, bro, that's such a stupid fucking interpretation. It's such a stupid fucking interpretation of afterlife mythology. It has to be Renaissance. That's such a stupid error in interpretation that nobody in the ancient world, classical world, believed that it has to be Renaissance. That stupid fucking interpretation has to be Protestant. The only stupid person who would come up with that is somebody who thinks that the options are submission to Islam or submission to Catholic slavery, Catholic serfdom, after the Renaissance, when those things were no longer tolerable for rich people. And then, very clearly, they convinced you that the same was, if the same was true for a rich person, the same was true for a pauper. Because we're all made equal. This is the basic tenet of humanism. Has to be a humanist error in translation. I don't know. My interest in human history ends the moment the Renaissance is said to begin, because I'm allowed to have favorites because I'm not a historian and I'm not a specialist and I don't publish in this stuff. My favorite is the early medieval. That makes me sad. That yellow jacket that was harassing me trying to get in the tent yesterday froze. Insects are not very smart. They're very numerous. That's something that the Sumerians understood about human beings. And something that more modern people, once they started to get into the basics of logic, inductive and deductive reasoning, started to just totally misunderstand it and mistranslate and misinterpret, because the people who came to these conclusions and said these things didn't have inductive or deductive reasoning. They were barely reasoning at all. But there's a myth, the Sumerian flood myth goes a little like, there were an impossible number of human beings and they were super noisy because there were so many of them. Either their prayers or just the din of their being were so numerous that they made a lot of noise and the gods couldn't rest, or at least the king of the gods uh, found them troublesome, so they needed to be culled, like a, I don't know, like deer, like a deer population that's gotten out of control, so to speak. That's gotten, and it's out of control, and so to speak, you use that particular idiom, out of control, and what you mean is they become a pest, they become a nuisance, they're at places that they shouldn't be, they're causing damage, property damage, etc. They're problematic, right? Out of control, because they're places that they're not supposed to be. Like, one of the things that humans do is control our environments. We control our inner environments, at the best of us do, and we control our exterior environments. And the methods that we use to control our inner and exterior environments really are what differentiate us. That's the meaning. And so, what is the meaning? The meaning is the commonality. What's mean? The mean is the average. So, what's common? That's what meaning is. The meaning of life is what's common to all people, and what's common to all people? Dying. Dying is the meaning of life. So how do people come to the conclusion that dying is important? How do people come to the conclusion that the manner of your death is important? Because everybody does it. Everybody does it. And what people figured out pretty quick is that people remember the way you died. And then what they figured out is that actually we interpret the way you died to mean a hell of a lot more about who you were than the way you lived. Because what we realized pretty quick is that the more complex language got, the better people got at lying. And that, the longer you stave off failure with lies, we know this, the longer you stave off failure with lies, the more spectacular the end result is. We know this. I'm going to go pee. Okay, so let's continue along the line of the longer you stave off failure, the more spectacular it is in the end, right? This is logic is math, okay? And so the reason that you learn basic arithmetic by 3rd grade is so you can put together complex sentences. So you can say if then sentences. You weren't taught the basics of philosophy, and you weren't taught these things like logic and reason and all these big words because they're big adult words that lack definitions. Children don't need to know all of the fibbledy-bibbledy about this because you're trying to give them a direct line between the idea and their small brains, because they're going to engage with these things for the rest of their lives because they're left definitionless. There's still work to be done communicating these ideas. Still important work to be done communicating these ideas, because you all dropped out of school in 4th grade. Without this information. So mathematics. All of us who've graduated high school have, somewhere along the line, found ourselves engaging with mathematics and found our answers coming out wildly wrong. Okay. Well, what does it matter if I don't understand how to factor this complex algebraic sentence down into a simpler algebraic expression so I can easily read it? What does it matter if I don't know how to do this? Well, mathematics translates to that which is learned, that which is taught, rather. And the reason these things have to be taught is because mathematics comes from building. We develop mathematics to build things, okay? Not just out of wood and grass and straw and whatever else, but out of stone. It required knowledge of math in order to build things out of stone, especially things that are bigger than you are, that are as big as like a pyramid of Giza. And so one of the things that the alternate historians, that I'm smiling in the way I am because it's truly charming how ignorant, stupid they are, but as educated as some of them really are, and as functionally good at math as some of them are. A lot of the reason that they get so stuck on how big these rocks are is because they can't imagine moving them because they've never experienced it. They'll even say that their incredulity that it's possible that these ancient people moved them in the ways that the theories suggest is because they've never seen anyone do it in that manner. And it's like, okay, well, if you had seen people move big rocks in any manner, it's not impossible that you might come up with a better way to do it. Because one of the things that the alternate historians, and this is where it becomes cute, one of the things that they can't wrap their heads around is doing something inefficiently and poorly for a really long time. Why wouldn't you use complex machines if you've got the mathematics and you have levers and fulcrum and pulleys and all these things? You know how to make simple and complex machines. Why not make simple and complex machines that do the work at increasing efficiencies like we do? Like right now, you know, technologically for us, the golden goose is the ever increasingly efficient engine, for example, right? Like the golden goose is kind of the perfectly efficient truck engine, right? Fuel efficiency, fuel to power, right? Combustion to working energy. These kinds of efficiencies are very important to engineers. Well, engineers began by throwing boulders and trees at the enemies of their nations. So a siege engineer and an inventor engineer are the same job historically. They're the same people, and they're doing the same thing. They're working in mathematics. And so if you've got the labor force, it doesn't matter whether you can think of a better machine to do the thing. If you've got 1 million people with nothing to do and good food to give them, they don't have to be slaves. They can be a very happily working labor force because there's nothing else the fuck to do. So you don't need efficient machinery, efficient complex stationary machinery like augers and power drills, power saws. You don't need these things. You have enough people that you can put a person. It's just, what is a body about 4 feet across? Every 4 feet, you can just station people shoulder to shoulder to shoulder all the way down the thing, and you can have them fucking take a toothbrush and cut that fucking log, or cut that fucking obelisk out, if that's what you want to do. You've got the workforce, and you've got the time. People think like, oh, these buildings had to go up fast because they were for kings, they were for the gods, and it's like, yeah, they needed to go up quickly, but they had the workforce. We're not talking about like labor strikes and wage negotiations. We're not talking about an Adam Smith. We're not talking about a post Adam Smith. We're not talking about a post John Maynard Keynes economy. We're not even talking about a post Yeoman Reformation economy where the workforce understand their individual contribution is valuable individually and as profitable individually. In the ancient world, when you're building these temples, when you're building these pyramids, when you're building these funerary complexes, when you're embalming people, what you think you're doing, even if you realize that there are ways to get personal riches, and even if there are people who are doing them for personal gain, there are also books being written at the time, contemporaneously. There are also books being written and sermons being held in the temples about how doing things for any reason besides duty to the gods, to the state, to your neighbors, to your family, to your inner child, to your inner being, that motivations for any reason besides duty to a higher calling are fundamental evil. Okay? And so now we return to the Sumerian creation myth, or at least the Sumerian flood myth, because the Sumerian flood myth doubles as a creation myth. That's why it doesn't easily reconcile. The flood myth in Genesis doesn't easily reconcile with the creation myth of Genesis, because it's not a recreation, it's a repopulation. Whereas in the Sumerian, it's an utter destruction of a thing that wasn't the same as modern human beings. Utter extinction of a thing that was different, and then a sort of repopulation with a different creature that was more servile, but more importantly, mortal. Human beings, the problem, according to some people, the way they translate it, is that the reason that the human beings were able to be so noisy is because there were no natural deaths. That's a bad humanist modern translation. Is why we were talking about this in the first place, to dismiss humanist translations. Modern translations. Bad humanist modern translations, especially of ancient works. But of anything. Think about it from the perspective of an ancient person who's going to these temples and believes deeply that these gods will heal them. Say you're a carpenter, okay? Say you're a craftsperson. Say you work retail. Say you serve food at a restaurant. Say you're a soldier. Say you're a king, and you fall. You just have a bad fall one day, and you break your leg, broken, and bad, compound fracture. It's out of the skin. So you go to this temple and you're praying that not only do the administrations, the balms, the resetting of the bone, the surgery, the stitches, the bandages, and the time spent in supplication, the time spent in rest and prayer, the time spent at the mercy of the priests and the priestesses, praying that your time spent and your service, the gifts that you're taking from them, but also your service for the temple while you're there, the money that you offer, whatever, that they will heal that leg. Isn't just about not having a broken leg. That's an immature and child's interpretation. A child of the modern world, where you break your leg and it's fixed and it's healed, and then you can just go and do the things that you could do. But that's a child's interpretation of what happens with medicine. You don't get better. You don't get better than you were before. You don't get back to 100%. You never get back to 100% after a serious injury that needs medical treatment. And back then, you're praying you can go back to work. Because if you can't go to work, you can't eat. Your life is going to be in service to a temple like this one for the rest of your life. If there is any more life after that. You might be forced into suicide or exile because you can't work. Because you can't do anything. It becomes your duty to die. Okay, well, please go somewhere and die where we don't have to see it and feel bad about it. We're going to feel bad enough watching you, feeding you. You guys do that to me, by the way. You do that to me. A lot of you. Hundreds of you a day, if I stay live in public about it. What if the reason the human beings before the change, before the repopulation and reconstitution of the human species, what if that creature, what if it wasn't immortal? Because what Utnapishtim in Gilgamesh knows about a flower that will make you immortal. And it's vanishingly rare in the world. You know, like a 0.01% spawn rate. So you can camp it your whole life and never see it. Well, that doesn't sound like something that an entire species of people would want or have access to. Like you can start to imagine like a civilization of people where their offspring have to compete for this thing, and you could come up with a fun alternate historical timeline, not dissimilar to like The Coming Race, like that stuff that I read. Fine, somebody pay me and I'll block it out, but I'm very unlikely to finish it because that's not interesting to me, or lucrative. There's no, like the movie 10,000 BC didn't do well. People who like this stuff don't actually go watch it because they don't actually like this stuff. They like that there's room for them to have an opinion outside consensus. But what if it's actually, it's not that all these people had this flower, because in the ancient world, Gilgamesh, with the flood narrative not being in Gilgamesh, the Gilgamesh epic is relying on you knowing it. I think it might be the Numa Elish, but I think that's just a creation myth. I don't know. I don't speak Sumerian or care to memorize this stuff. I don't get paid for that. But the guy from the flood myth is in the story of Gilgamesh without his story being told. We just get the detail that he knows about this flower. And so what that means is that the myth writer, the Gilgamesh epic narrator, had to explain to us how Utnapishtim was immortal, which means that the people who were being told this flood myth, the people who grew up with this flood myth as their worldview and their reality, the way they understood history to have played out to them now, did not think, they did not believe that the people before the flood were immortal. It indicates to me that what they believed was that the gods thought these people were noisy because the gods were slaves to them. What it sounds like is that there was actually a rebellion where the gods revolted against the humans. That if people lived unnaturally long lives, and I don't know why we should think that isn't what the gods said. The gods said they were too numerous and noisy. Not that they lived unnaturally long lives and it went against the natural order of things. That's a humanist, much later kind of mythical narrative. Much later mythical narratives, and mythical narratives evolve in ways because they only complexify and evolve under the pressures of their audiences and the sophistication of their audiences, the degree to which their audiences can be critical of them. Sumerian people had no reason to be critical of this myth. And I know they weren't critical of the myth, and they weren't thinking that again, I'm going to repeat myself, I know they weren't thinking that these people were inherently immortal, because if they were thinking these people were inherently immortal, then the only surviving member of their clade, right, is Utnapishtim, and he's immortal because of a flower. What's more likely to me, what I think makes more sense, is that the gods gave them everything they wanted at all times. They got everything they wanted at all times, and it just made them noisy. All they did was ask for things. They didn't do anything on their own. It's not that they never died. It's that all of their children survived, and all of their crops flourished, and they just never stopped asking Marduk for boons. Hands out, feet astray, all these things. All these things we say about people in my class. The homeless, the needy, the poor, the sick, the ill. They got everything they wanted. And then Marduk said, nah, kill them all. It would be more merciful to just sweep them away in a flood than to stop suddenly, out of nowhere. It would be more merciful to kill them. And I'm of the opinion that the Sumerians are right. I'm of the opinion that the Sumerians are right. That people lived an amazing, perfect life. So perfect that they were loud at night. So loud at night that the reason you can't hear them anymore, these are the questions a child would ask, a 4-year-old. Well, if they were so loud, why can't we hear them? If this people group are so loud, why don't we hear them at night? Why don't we make noise at night? If that's what prosperity is making noise at night, why don't we do it? The questions a 4-year-old would ask. And the answer is so funny too, because you can tell at what age group people are thinking, because the answer is obvious if you're older than 4 years old. If you're 5 years old, the answer is obvious. Because the gods killed them for it. That's why we don't do it. It's an affront to the gods. We have so much prosperity during the day. Can we not let the gods rest at night? Do we really have to pray at night? Do we really have to bang all these drums and make all this music and celebrate the gods at night too? Because if you really think about what that life would be like, having so much prosperity from the gods that you're praying and revering 24/7, think about the duty, the demands on a Muslim as compared with a Christian or a Jew. Same region of the world. In fact, those three religious systems are responses to the Sumerian, Perso-Babylonian religions. Because nothing's just a straight line of information. Even the Bible is this massive bandwidth of information that is trying to force in with very simple passages. Because you're talking to a 4-year-old, but you're trying to explain to them things that are 100,000 years old, information that we have. And so the information that we've learned and that we've taught one another. And so this gets us to mathematics, and we can end on engineering and building. The ancient archaeologists always they always make the argument that, well, we never see anything in partial stages of building, or we never see any failed attempts to build anything. And it's like, okay, you're building in Minecraft. How many partial builds are you leaving lay around? Or are you just scavenging all of your partial builds for full builds? Come on.